Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. Locked down as we are, well, maybe some of us are not as locked down as we have been, but some of us are. We're relishing the opportunity to focus our attention, our consciousness on hearing and chanting, remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all His eternal associates and how they've taught us to be devotees. We're very fortunate. The world is literally on fire, and people have no idea of why. But we have a clear idea of why, and therefore we are more or less undisturbed. Not that we don't feel badly about the suffering that's going on, and the confusion, and the chaos, and the violence, and the increasing polemics, quarreling on all levels. But on the other hand, in the face of such disturbances, when one tastes the nectar of the absolute truth, it becomes even more beautiful. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives the example of if you're in a completely dark room and you burn just a single candle flame, it's very beautiful. But if the room is widely lit, that same candle flame will just be insignificant. You hardly pay attention to it. So like that, when things get rough, the taste of Krishna consciousness, when we're in Krishna consciousness, is even more beautiful. So we should count our blessings, build our house of bhakti on as deep a foundation of gratitude as we can, and soldier on, setting the proper example of how to be happy in such a difficult situation. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I share this every day because I wanted to go deep. I wanted to go deep just how great a scripture the Sri Caitanya-caritämrta is. I've been reading it for a very long time, and once I was reading it in Govardhan, and there were some devotees, guests from some temple, and one of them asked me in the middle of the reading, "Can we read this book?" And I was shocked. I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, I was told by my authorities that I couldn't read the book." And I said, "What do you mean? Do you mean before you read the Bhagavatam?" "No, they told me that we can't read it. We're not qualified." Of course, maybe that was her misunderstanding, whatever it was. But Prabhupada translated this book. He stopped translating and commenting on the Bhagavatam at the 5th canto in order to finish completely the Caitanya-caritämrta. It's an extremely important book, and we should read it. Anyway, to give you an idea, a poetic description of how important it is, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, said this: "In due course, Mahapralaya, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. Or, if you cannot hold all three, then release Bhagavad Gita. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam, but under no circumstances release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage, because after it has subsided, the message of Shastra will be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So, Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita that the most confidential knowledge was to always remember him, become his devotee, offer obeisances and homage unto him. He said it twice, actually. End of the 9th chapter and toward the end of the 18th chapter. So now the Caitanya-caritämrta is in the 4th chapter, Ädi-lilä, which is where we are. It's describing the internal reasons, the confidential reasons for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. He's described how he wanted to taste his own beauty and nectar, and he wanted to taste what it was that Radharani tasted when she loved him in her devotional service. And now we've come to the 3rd desire, confidential desire, internal desire, that prompted Lord Chaitanya to come to this material world. Ädi-lilä, chapter 4. The confidential reasons for the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. I'm going to read text 159. We read it yesterday, but this will give us some continuity. This is a description of his 2nd desire. Now, please listen as I describe the 3rd. Text 160. This conclusion of rasa is extremely deep. Only Sarup Damodar knows much about it. Text 161. Anyone else who claims to know it must have heard it from him, for he was the most intimate companion of Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu. 162. The love of the gopis is called Rudha Bhava. It is pure and spotless. It is not at any time lust. Purport. As already explained, the position of the gopis in their loving dealings with Krishna is transcendental. Their emotion is called Rudha Bhava. Although it is apparently like mundane sex, one should not confuse it with mundane sexual love, for it is pure and unadulterated love of Godhead. Text 163. The pure love of the gopis has become celebrated by the name lust. The dear devotees of the Lord, headed by Sri Uddhava, desire to taste that love. Purport. This is a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2, 285. 164. Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. Purport. One should try to discriminate between sexual love and pure love, for they belong to different categories with a gulf of difference between them. They are as different from one another as iron is from gold. Text 165. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust. But the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. Purport. The revealed scriptures describe pure love as follows. Sarvata dvang sarahitam satyapi dvang shakarane yad bhava bandhanam yuno saprema parikirtitaha. If there is ample reason for the dissolution of a conjugal relationship, and yet such a dissolution does not take place, such a relationship of intimate love is called pure. The predominated gopis were bound to Krishna in such pure love. For them, there was no question of sexual love based on sense gratification. Their only engagement in life was to see Krishna happy in all respects, regardless of their own personal interests. They dedicated their souls only for the satisfaction of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. There was not the slightest tinge of sexual love between the gopis and Krishna. The author of Sri Caitanya-caritämrta asserts with authority that sexual love is a matter of personal sense enjoyment. All the regulative principles in the Vedas pertaining to desires for popularity, fatherhood, wealth, and so on are different phases of sense gratification. Acts of sense gratification may be performed under the cover of public welfare, nationalism, religion, altruism, ethical codes, biblical codes, health directives, fruitive action, bashfulness, tolerance, personal comfort, liberation from material bondage, progress, family affection, or fear of social ostracism or legal punishment. But all these categories are different subdivisions of one substance, sense gratification. All such good acts are performed basically for one's own sense gratification, for no one can sacrifice his personal interest while discharging these much advertised moral and religious principles. I'll repeat that. All such good acts are performed basically for one's own sense gratification, for no one can sacrifice his personal interest while discharging these much advertised moral and religious principles. But above all this is a transcendental stage in which one feels himself to be only an eternal servitor of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. All acts performed in this sense of servitude is called pure love of God, because they are performed for the absolute sense gratification of Sri Krishna. However, any act performed for the purpose of enjoying its fruits or results is an act of sense gratification. Such actions are visible sometimes in gross and sometimes in subtle forms. Text 166. The object of lust is only the enjoyment of one's own senses. But love caters to the enjoyment of Lord Krishna, and thus it is very powerful. Loka dharma, Veda dharma, Deha dharma karma, Lajja, Darya Deha Sukha, Atma Sukha Marma, Dusyajya Aryapada, Nija Parijana, Swajane Kadaye Yata, Tadana Bhartsana. Sarvatyagi Kari, Kara Krishnara Bhajana, Krishna Sukha Hetu Kari, Prema Sevana. Social customs scriptural injunctions, bodily demands, fruitive action, shyness, patience, bodily pleasures, self-gratification, and the path of Varnashram Dharma, which is difficult to give up. The gopis have forsaken all these, along with their families, and suffered their relatives' punishment and scolding, all for the sake of serving Lord Krishna. They render loving service to him for the sake of his enjoyment. Text 170. That is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure, like a clean cloth that has no stain. Purport. The author of Sri Caitanya-caritämrta advises everyone to give up all engagements of sense gratification and, like the gopis, dovetail oneself entirely with the will of the Supreme Lord. That is the ultimate instruction of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We should be prepared to do anything and everything to please the Lord, even at the risk of violating the Vedic principles or ethical laws. That is the standard of love of Godhead. Such activities in pure love of Godhead are as spotless as white linen that has been completely washed. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur warns us in this connection that we should not mistakenly think that the idea of giving up everything implies the renunciation of duties necessary in relation to the body and mind. Even such duties are not sense gratification if they are undertaken in a spirit of service to Krishna. 171. Therefore, lust and love are quite different. Lust is like dense darkness, but love is like the bright sun. 172. Thus there is not the slightest taint of lust in the gopis' love. Their relationship with Krishna is only for the sake of his enjoyment. O dearly beloved, your lotus feet are so soft that we place them gently on our breasts, fearing that your feet will be hurt. Our life rests only in you. Our minds, therefore, are filled with anxiety that your tender feet might be wounded by pebbles as you roam about on the forest path. Purport. This text from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:31-19 was spoken by the gopis when Krishna left them in the midst of the Rasa-lila. Text 174. The gopis do not care for their own pleasures or pains. All their physical and mental activities are directed toward offering enjoyment to Lord Krishna. 175. They renounced everything for Krishna. They have pure attachment to giving Krishna pleasure. Text 176. O my beloved gopis, you have renounced social customs, scriptural injunctions, and your relatives for my sake. I disappeared behind you only to increase your concentration upon me. Since I disappeared for your benefit, you should not be displeased with me. Purport. This text from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:32-21 was spoken by Lord Krishna when he returned to the arena of the Rasa-lila. 177. Lord Krishna has a promise. Lord Krishna has a promise from before to reciprocate with his devotees according to the way they worship him. And here we go again. Right in the middle of the most intimate descriptions is a text of the Bhagavad Gita, the perfect scripture. Text 178. Ye yatam mam prapadyante tangs tatai babajam yaham manuvartante manusha partasarvashaha. In whatever way my devotees surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport. Krishna was never ungrateful to the gopis, for as he declares to Arjuna in this verse from the Bhagavad Gita 4:11, he reciprocates with his devotees in proportion to the transcendental loving service they render unto him. Everyone follows the path that leads toward him. But there are different degrees of progress on that path, and the Lord is realized in proportion to one's advancement. The path is one, but the progress in approaching the ultimate goal is different, and therefore the proportion of realization of this goal, namely the absolute personality of Godhead, is also different. The gopis attained the highest goal, and Lord Chaitanya affirmed that there is no method of worshipping God higher than that followed by the gopis. 179. That promise has been broken by the worship of the gopis, as Lord Krishna himself admits. Napadaye ham nirabhadya samyujam swasadu krityam vibhudasyujapi bhaha ya mabhajan durjanageya shrinkala sangvrishchatad va padiyatu sadhuna. O gopis, I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service, even within a lifetime of Brahma. Your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties, which are difficult to break. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. Purport. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:32-22 was spoken by Sri Krishna himself when he returned to the gopis upon hearing their songs of separation. Text 181. Now, whatever affection we see the gopis show for their own bodies, know it for certain to be only for the sake of Lord Krishna. Purport. The selfless love of Godhead exhibited by the gopis cannot have any parallel. We should not, therefore, misunderstand the carefulness of the gopis in their personal decoration. The gopis dressed themselves as beautifully as possible just to make Krishna happy by seeing them. They had no ulterior distress. They had no ulterior desires. They dedicated their bodies and everything they possessed to the service of Sri Krishna, taking it for granted that their bodies were meant for his enjoyment. They dressed themselves with the understanding that Krishna would be happy by seeing and touching them. Text 182. The gopis think, I have offered this body to Lord Krishna, he is its owner, and it brings him enjoyment. 183. Krishna finds joy in seeing and touching this body. It is for this reason that they cleanse and decorate their bodies. Text 184. O Arjuna, there are no greater receptacles of deep love for me than the gopis, who cleanse and decorate their bodies because they consider them mine. Purport. This verse was spoken by Lord Krishna in the Adi Purana. Text 185. There is another wonderful feature of the emotion of the gopis. Its power is beyond the comprehension of the intelligence. 186. When the gopis see Lord Krishna, they derive unbounded bliss, although they have no desire for such pleasure. 187. The gopis taste a pleasure 10 million times greater than the pleasure Lord Krishna derives from seeing them. Purport. The wonderful characteristics of the gopis are beyond imagination. They have no desire for personal satisfaction. Yet when Krishna is happy by seeing them, that happiness of Krishna makes the gopis 1,000,000 times more happy than Krishna himself. 188. The gopis have no inclination for their own enjoyment, and yet their joy increases. That is indeed a contradiction. For this contradiction, I see only one solution. The joy of the gopis lies in the joy of their beloved Krishna. Purport. The situation of the gopis is perplexing, for although they did not want personal happiness, it was imposed upon them. The solution to this perplexity is that Sri Krishna's sense of happiness is limited by the happiness of the gopis. Devotees at Vrindavan therefore tried to serve the gopis, namely Radharani and her associates. If one gains the favor of the gopis, he easily gains the favor of Krishna, because on the recommendation of the gopis, Krishna at once accepts the service of a devotee. Lord Chaitanya therefore wanted to please the gopis instead of Krishna, but his contemporaries misunderstood him. For this reason, Lord Chaitanya renounced the order of householder life and became a sannyasi. Text 190. When Lord Krishna sees the gopis, his joy increases, and its unparalleled sweetness increases also. 191. The gopis think, Krishna has obtained so much pleasure by seeing me. That thought increases the fullness and beauty of their faces and bodies. 192. The beauty of Lord Krishna increases at the sight of the beauty of the gopis, and the more the gopis see Lord Krishna's beauty, the more their beauty increases. 193. In this way a competition takes place between them, in which no one acknowledges defeat. 194. Krishna, however, derives pleasure from the beauty and good qualities of the gopis. And when the gopis see his pleasure, the joy of the gopis increases. 195. Therefore we find that the joy of the gopis nourishes the joy of Lord Krishna. For that reason, the fault of lust is not present in their love. I'll repeat that again. This is a very important verse. Therefore we find that the joy the gopis nourishes. Therefore we find that the joy of the gopis nourishes the joy of Lord Krishna. For that reason, the fault of lust is not present in their love. Purport. By looking at the beautiful gopis, Krishna becomes enlivened, and this enlivens the gopis, whose youthful faces and bodies blossom. This competition of increasing beauty between the gopis and Krishna, which is without limitations, is so delicate that sometimes mundane moralists mistake these dealings to be purely amorous. But these affairs are not at all mundane, because the gopis' intense desire to satisfy Krishna surcharges the entire scene with pure love of Godhead, with not a spot of sexual indulgence. Text 196. I worship Lord Keshava. Coming back from the forest of Braja, he is worshipped by the gopis, who mount the roofs of their palaces and meet him on the path with 100 manners of dancing glances and gentle smiles. The corners of his eyes wander like large black bees around the gopis' breasts. Purport. This statement appears in the Keshavashtaka 8 of the Stavamala compiled by Srila Rupa Goswami. 197. There is another natural symptom of the gopis' love that shows it to be without a trace of lust. 198. The love of the gopis nourishes the sweetness of Lord Krishna. That sweetness in turn increases their love, for they are greatly satisfied. 199. The happiness of the abode of love, the happiness of the abode of love is in the happiness of the object of that love. This is not a relationship of desire for personal sense gratification. When there is unselfish love, that is its style. The reservoir of love derives pleasure when the lovable object is pleased. When the pleasure of love interferes with the service of Lord Krishna, the devotee becomes angry toward such ecstasy. Purport. As mentioned above, the gopis are the predominated lovers, and Sri Krishna is the predominator, the beloved. The love of the predominated nourishes the love of the predominator. The gopis had no desire for selfish enjoyment. Their feeling of happiness was indirect, for it was dependent on the pleasure of Krishna. Causeless love of Godhead is always so. Such pure love is possible only when the predominated is made happy by the happiness of the predominator. Such unadulterated love is exemplified when the lover deprecates her happiness if it hinders her from discharging her service. 202. Shidaraka did not relish his ecstatic feelings of love, for they caused his limbs to become stunned and thus obstructed his service of fanning Lord Krishna. Purport. This verse is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 3.2.62. The lotus-eyed Radharani powerfully condemned the ecstatic love that caused a flow of tears that hindered her sight of Govinda. Purport. This verse is also from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.3.54. Furthermore, pure devotees never forsake the loving service of Lord Krishna to aspire for their own personal pleasure through the 5 kinds of liberation. Purport. A pure devotee of Krishna who loves him exclusively will flatly refuse to accept any sort of liberation, beginning from merging with the body of the Lord and extending to the other varieties of liberation, such as equality of form, opulence, or abode, and the opulence of living near the Lord. Text 205. Just as the celestial waters of the Ganges flow unobstructed into the ocean, so when my devotees simply hear of me, their minds come to me, who reside in the hearts of all. 206. These are the characteristics of transcendental loving service to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is causeless and it cannot be obstructed in any way. 207. My devotees do not accept salokya, sarshti, sarupya, samipya, or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serving me. Purport. These three verses from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:29, 11 through 13 were spoken by Krishna in the form of Kapila Dev. My devotees, having fulfilled their desires by serving me, do not accept the four kinds of salvation that are easily earned by such service. Why then should they accept any pleasures that are lost in the course of time? Purport. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 9.4.67 was spoken by the Lord in connection with the characteristics of Maharaj Ambarish. Merging into the existence of the Absolute is as temporary as living in the celestial kingdom. Both of them are controlled by time. Neither position is permanent. 209. The natural love of the gopis is devoid of any trace of lust. It is faultless, bright and pure, like molten gold. 210. The gopis are the helpers, teachers, friends, wives, dear disciples, confidants, and serving maids of Lord Krishna. 211. O Partha, I speak to you the truth. The gopis are my helpers, teachers, disciples, servants, friends, and consorts. I do not know what they are not to me. Purport. This verse was spoken by Lord Krishna in the Gopi Premamrita. Text 212. The gopis know Krishna's desires, and they know how to render perfect loving service for his enjoyment. They perform their service expertly for the satisfaction of their beloved. 213. O Partha, the gopis know my greatness, my loving service, respect for me, and my mentality. Others cannot really know these. Purport. This verse was spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna in the Adi Purana. Among the gopis, Srimati Radhika is the foremost. She surpasses all in beauty, in good qualities, in good fortune, and above all, in love. Purport. Among the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most exalted. She is the most beautiful, the most qualified, and above all, the greatest lover of Krishna. 215. Just as Radha is dear to Lord Krishna, so her bathing place, Radha Kund, is dear to him. She alone is his most beloved. She alone is his most beloved of all the gopis. Purport. This verse is from the Padma Purana. 216. O Partha, in all the three planetary systems, this earth is especially fortunate, for on earth is the town of Vrindavan. And there the gopis are especially glorious, because among them is my Srimati Radharani. Purport. This verse, spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, is cited from the Adi Purana. 217. All the other gopis help increase the joy of Krishna's pastimes with Radharani. The gopis act as the instruments of their mutual enjoyment. Purport. It is said that the gopis are divided into 5 groups, namely the Sakhis, Nitya Sakhis, Prana Sakhis, Priya Sakhis, and Paramaprishta Sakhis. All these fair complexioned associates of Srimati Radharani, the Queen of Vrindavan Dham, are expert artists in evoking erotic sentiments in Krishna. The Paramaprishta Sakhis are 8 in number, and in their ecstatic dealings of Krishna and Radha, they side sometimes with Krishna and at other times with Radharani, just to create a situation in which it appears that they favor one against the other. That makes the exchange of mellows more palatable. 218. Radha is the beloved consort of Krishna. She is the wealth of his life. Without her, the gopis cannot give him pleasure. 220. Lord Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, left aside the other gopis during the rasa dance and took Srimati Radharani to his heart, for she is the helper of the Lord in realizing the essence of his desires. Purport. In this verse from the Gita Govinda 3.1, Jayadev Goswami describes Sri Krishna's leaving the Rasa Lila to search for Srimati Radharani. Text 220. Lord Chaitanya appeared with the sentiment of Radha. He preached the Dharma of this age, the chanting of the holy name, and pure love of God. 221. In the mood of Srimati Radharani, he also fulfilled his own desires. This is the principal reason for his appearance. 222. Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya is Krishna, Brajendra Kumar, the embodiment of rasas. He is amorous love personified. 223. He made his appearance to taste that conjugal mellow and incidentally to broadcast all the rasas. My dear friends, just see how Sri Krishna is enjoying the season of spring. With the gopis embracing each of his limbs, he is like amorous love personified. With his transcendental pastimes, he enlivens all the gopis and the entire creation. With his soft bluish-black arms and legs, which resemble blue lotus flowers, he has created a festival for Cupid. Purport. This is also a verse from the Gita Govinda 1:11. Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the abode of rasa. He himself tasted the sweetness of rasa in endless ways. 226. Thus he initiated the Dharma for the age of Kali. The devotees of Lord Chaitanya know all these truths. Purport. Lord Chaitanya is Sri Krishna himself, the absolute enjoyer of the love of the gopis. He himself assumes the role of the gopis to taste the predominated happiness of transcendental mellows. He appeared in that mode, but simultaneously he propagated the religious process for this age in a most fascinating way. Only the confidential devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can understand this transcendental secret. (227 and 228). Advaita Acharya, Lord Nityananda, Srivas Pandit, Gadadhar Pandit, Sarup Damodar, Murari Gupta, Haridas Thakur, and all the other devotees of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, bowing down with devotion, I hold their lotus feet on my head. Purport. The author of Sri Caitanya-caritämrta teaches us that we must offer our respectful obeisances to all such pure confidential devotees of Lord Chaitanya, if we indeed want to know him in truth. 229. I have given a hint of the 6th verse. Now please hear as I reveal the meaning of that original verse. Shri Radhayak Pranaya Mahima Kidvisho Vanayai Va Swadyo Yenad Bhutamadurima Kidvisho Va Madiyaha Saukyam Chasya Mad Anubhavata kidrisham vetilo bad. Tad bhavadya samajani sachi garba sindau harinduhu. Desiring to understand the glory of Radharani's love, the wonderful qualities in him that she alone relishes through her love, and the happiness she feels when she realizes the sweetness of his love, the Supreme Lord Hari, richly endowed with her emotions, appeared from the womb of Srimati Shachi Devi as the moon appeared from the ocean. Text 231. All these conclusions are unfit to disclose in public. But if they are not disclosed, no one will understand them. Therefore I shall mention them, revealing only their essence, so that loving devotees will understand them, but fools will not. Anyone who has captured Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda Prabhu in his heart will become blissful by hearing all these transcendental conclusions. 234. All these conclusions are like the newly grown twigs of a mango tree. They are always pleasing to the devotees, who in this way resemble cuckoo birds. The camel-like non-devotees cannot enter into these topics. Therefore, there is a special jubilation in my heart. This is a very important verse. I'll read it again. The camel-like non-devotees cannot enter into these topics. Therefore, there is a special jubilation in my heart. (236). For fear of them, I do not wish to speak. But if they do not understand, then what can be happier in all the three worlds? 237. Therefore, after offering obeisances to the devotees for their satisfaction, I shall speak without hesitating. And I'll stop there. We'll stop there. We'll read that verse again. Text 237. Hare Krishna, Shri Shri Radha and Krishna ki jai. Shri Shri Chaitanya, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Okay, I know that you're all stunned. Probably you can't speak because you're rolling on the ground or something crazy like that. But now's the time. If there's anything to say, now's the time to say it.
Something from Santa Rupa Devi Dasi.
Santa Rupa Devi Dasi. Santa Rupa, where are you from? You can type it later. Go ahead.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, could you please elaborate a bit on the reason why Krishna accepted the sannyas order? Thank you.
When Lord Chaitanya appeared in Navadvip, he was so beautiful, even as a baby, that anyone who saw him, they could not take their eyes off of him. But he hid himself, even from his own eternal associates. There's an example of this. One time, Sachimata, it was time for Lord Chaitanya to come. I'm sorry. It was time for Vishwarup. Vishwarup is the older brother of Lord Chaitanya. So sometimes, not sometimes, regularly. Vishwarupa would go to the house of Advaita Acharya to hear about Krishna Bhakti. And sometimes Shaktimata would send Lord Chaitanya, even when he was a little child, baby, to Advaita Acharya's house to fetch him to come back for lunch. And I suppose this happened many times, but there's one such incident described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat where Lord Chaitanya comes in and he's so beautiful that everyone, including Advaita Acharya, just stopped whatever they were doing and just looked at him and just couldn't believe their eyes at how beautiful this person was. So like that, he grew up very, very attractive to everyone, but when he became a student, he was so intelligent. He was so much more intelligent than anyone. He would defeat someone, and then he would take the point that he's making to defeat them, he would take that position and defeat that position. And then he would take that position and defeat that position. And he could go on forever. So after some time, the devotees became afraid of him. They would, they saw him walking down the street, they would walk to the other side so that they wouldn't have to confront him and become harangued and defeated and embarrassed. So this way Lord Chaitanya became a great, how do I say, he appeared to be arrogant, he appeared to be proud of his learning, and he was more learned than anyone. But then, when he went up, when his father passed away, well actually it was before that, when Ishwar Puri came to visit, Ishwar Puri stayed in his house for some time, and there he knew that, of course, he knew everything. Lord Chaitanya knew everything all the time, but he was pretending, he was putting on a show, putting on a drama. So when he met with Ishwar Puri, he fell in love with Ishwar Puri as a spiritual master and didn't say anything. But then later on, when his father passed away, and he went up to Gaya to do the Shraddha ceremony in Gaya, then he saw Ishwara Puri. And then he fell at his feet and begged him for initiation. As soon as he got initiated into the holy name, Lord Chaitanya became like a madman. He changed completely. He was exhibiting pure love of Krishna all the time. And when he came back to the place where to Navadvip, and he had a school, by that time he had a school, and he was very reputed. He had already defeated the Keshava Kashmiri, who was a big Digvijay Pandit who went around and defeated everyone and then claimed great opulence and power and authority all over India. So he was very elevated in that way. But when he came back, he started teaching his students grammar in such a way that they always came to a name of Krishna. And they were confused because he changed, he seemed to change completely. And one day, some of the elder students who couldn't understand what was going on, they came to see him and they saw him chanting the names of the gopis. So now Lord Chaitanya has come out in his desire to understand what we've just heard in this chapter. The love of the gopis and how they love Krishna and how Krishna loves them. And so he was in that mood. So he was calling out the names of the gopis. And these students came to him and they said, "Why are you chanting the name of gopis? You should be chanting Krishna's name. He's the absolute, the supreme truth." And then Lord Chaitanya got a stick out and he started to chase them. And they ran away. And they ran and they gathered together. and they started to plot against him. They said, if he ever does that again, this proud, puffed up, Lord Chaitanya, well, actually it was called Nimai in that time, Nimai Pandit. We will do something back. We will take revenge. So anyway, Lord Chaitanya, he's Krishna. He knows everything. He's omniscient. So he knew they felt like that. And then he decided, I've come here to deliver everyone, and these rascals are escaping my loving network. So I will take a position in which they will be forced to bow down. Because in those days, even today in India, if a sannyasi comes dressed like a sannyasi, people will bow down or give him special respect. That's the culture. He thought, if I don't do this, then how will they be delivered? If they make an offense to me, how will they be delivered? So I'll force them to bow down by taking sannyas. But his real internal reason we've just heard about. And that was because he wanted to be left alone and not have any other duties except for chanting Hare Krishna. But he taught us how to become actually eligible for that platform, to actually understand these things that we were reading about tonight, by preaching the glories of the Lord in a very, very elevated and exalted way. And after he had delivered the most important, learned persons in India, everyone, and common people also, everyone, then finally he came back to Puri, and he relished with Swarup Damodar these things that we're hearing about now. That's something.
Sant Swarup Devi Dasi writes that she's from Belgium, serving in the Welsh Yatra.
Who?
Shantarupa Devi
Shantarupa Devi Dasi.
Yes. Mother of Mantri Raj.
Oh, Mother of Mantri Raj. Hare Krishna. We met once. Hare Krishna.
She says thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Something from Sarva.
Okay, Sarva.
He says, Maharaj, can you elaborate on the camel-like men who can't understand Lord Chaitanya?
Well, we heard about it very deeply already. Anybody who is engaged in sense gratification can't understand Lord Chaitanya. And the one thing that they have to give up, the main thing, is sex indulgence. So, camel-like devotee means that the camels, they eat thorns, and then the thorn inside their mouth cuts their tongue and cheeks, and blood comes out, and then it mixes with the thorns, and they think that it's very tasty. So people who indulge in sex, the men lose their blood in the form of semen, and it takes 60 drops of blood to make 1 drop of semen. So when they lose their semen, they're actually being bled, but they think it's tasty. So therefore they're like camels, camel-like devotees. And anybody who is still engaged in illicit sex cannot understand Lord Chaitanya. Such people will try to relish these topics before their hearts are purified, and they end up deviating in so many ways in the name of the higher topics, Krishna consciousness. What makes us eligible for being able to perform pure devotional service is our ability to give up sense gratification. And we just heard how elevated that sense gratification can be, or the most elevated form of that, of real love, is when the gopis, they dress themselves, and external they look like they're dressing up to be enjoyed, to enjoy with Krishna, but they're not. There's not a tinge of that. There's not a tinge of a desire for their own sensual pleasure. Their only desire is to see Krishna pleased, even when it comes to decorating themselves and so many other things. So the camel-like non-devotees, because they're engaged in sense gratification, because they're attached to the things they own and the things that they think they own, because they don't really own anything, because nothing can belong to them forever. They can't understand. As long as that mentality is there to enjoy, you can see it in the devotees that are actually sahaja, or just sentimental, or neophyte, trying to act like they're devotees. They take very cheaply. They go into these topics very cheaply, thinking of their relationship with Krishna. They're not thinking of serving Krishna. They're thinking of how to enjoy with Krishna. That's all.
Something from Rati Manjari.
Okay, Rati, Hare Krishna.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. In relation to Lord Chaitanya, you just mentioned the phrase, loving network. This term has long fascinated me. Could you please elaborate on what it means, also in relationship to our ISKCON movement?
Lord Chaitanya came to deliver pure love of Krishna to everyone without consideration. And all of his followers that actually follow in his footsteps are the loving network. That is Lord Chaitanya's loving network. The devotees who are sincerely following his teachings and running after the conditioned souls. And because Lord Chaitanya chanted Hare Krishna, whoever heard him chant or watched him and saw him, they became pure lovers of Krishna immediately, without any other activity. And they would go to their villages, and anyone who saw them and touched them and heard them chant would also become lovers of Krishna. So that's the loving network. Those who have heard the Mahamantra and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in Caitanya-caritämrta, who teach that to others and show by their personal example the taste and so on and so forth. That's the loving network. Srila Prabhupada spread the loving network of his army of book distributors. So now their devotees, resourceful devotees, are figuring out different ways to go out and to give books through the internet and other ways, so they don't even have to socially interact, physically. This is the loving network. That's it.
Rati Manjari says, Jai.
That's it. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Let us dive deeper, even deeper if it's possible. We'll dive even deeper tomorrow. This is a very long and very wonderful chapter. It takes you from the very beginning to the end of ecstasy. Of course, we can't taste that ecstasy yet in this, but whatever we do, to the degree that we do enjoy this, and then give it to others, and not in the spirit of sense enjoyment, not in the spirit of enjoyment, but in the service, in the spirit of service. If we serve the holy name, if we serve Krishna, means, and we just learned what it means to do it for the pleasure of Krishna only, for the pleasure of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only, and for the pleasure of others, to relieve the conditioned souls of their suffering by delivering to them pure love of God, Lord Chaitanya's loving glance. So we'll dive into it deeper tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone out there in cyberspace. Please stay safe, stay well, stay happy in all respects, as we just heard, that the pure love of God is so powerful, it cannot be stopped by anything, even a pandemic. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow, everyone. Same place, same time, same station. Hare Krishna.